is. Sometimes it's kind of fun to stare if you're not actually judging, because then you're busy if you are, but if you're not, to kind of keep an eye on the chief judge and see who the secret tie-breaking ballot judge is. Keep an eye on the chief judge, because he will go to someone and pick up that ballot. Yeah, a little subtle handoff. Right? And then that ballot then stays in his pocket, or her pocket, because it's not counted with the other ballots. Instead, this tie-breaking ballot is only for, obviously, if there is a tie. But it can be tied for first. It could be a tie between the second and third. If it anywhere, but that's why they rank all 9. And it doesn't, if there's isn't a tie for first, that person wins. The tie-breaking ballot is irrelevant. If there's a tie for second, then they go to the ballot. They look at the 2 people who tied on the tie-breaking judge's ballot. Whichever one is ranked first, that breaks the tie. So it doesn't matter who the tie-breaking judge had first. It's just whoever was highest among whoever is tied. And that only comes out of the pocket, out of the chief judge's pocket, if there is a tie. If not, he shouldn't even look at it. It just goes right into the garbage after the contest. Yeah?
So if, with your example, if you had 2 people that hit tie, you pulled out the tiebreaker, does the other person who's now not second place get moved into third, and the third person gets bumped?
Yes, if you've got 4 speakers, the first one wins, okay, cleanly, and then there's 2 people who have the second most number of points, then the tiebreaker ballot is used to determine which is third, which is second, and which is third. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, that's the tie-breaking judge. Any other questions about the tie-breaking judges? All right, what makes a good judge? To me, the number one thing is just being responsible. That means being there on time. Don't wait till a minute before the contest is supposed to start. You'll miss the judge's briefing. Be there when they ask you to be there. Be there at the time when registration starts, so you can start getting a feel for it and just get into the environment a little bit, start focusing. It also means critical thinking, not just hearing the speech and then saying, yeah, my gut tells me this person won. Thinking critically about their speech, the elements of their speech. It's listening very carefully and very aware, much differently than you would if you were just listening to a speech. It's very active listening. And so you have to be very focused. It's difficult. It's hard to maintain your focus that tight, especially if you don't particularly like the speech. But you have to be constantly assessing. It means preparing. Know the ballot before the contest. Don't just wait until you sit down. The first time you see it shouldn't be the time when it's handed to you by the chief judge.
My question?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know as a judge, you hear this great speech, and then suddenly it's like, now you have a minute. So I'm like, how do a minute? I'm real critical. It's like, how do you? Is there techniques of kind of this is what's important and this is what's not important. So when I get to that minute, I already know. So I'm not panicking and kind of overgeneralizing the person.
Okay, we're going to get into some of this thinking process a little later, and it's going to be interesting because I disagree with what Toastmasters normally taught, and I will tell you that I disagree, and I will tell you what Toastmasters want you to do, to be fair. So do what Toastmasters want you to do, but I don't. How do you handle it, all that information overload? I've also heard it said that you should wait until all the speeches are done before, or at least until the speech is done before you start filling out the numbers. I start filling out some of the numbers below. The delivery issues, obviously it's hard to judge speech structure in the first 2 minutes, but you can judge some of the delivery issues and grammar and vocal variety. Change it if you want to, but I usually start filling in some of the bottom part of the form pretty early on. So try and catch some of those and to change it. The other thing I do is take notes, and we'll talk more about note-taking and the importance of note-taking, just because then I can go back and look at it again and make a quick decision. But I don't have to sit there and try and remember everything at once, but I actually have a couple of notes to go back on, things that really impressed me. Not a lot, but just a line or two. What was the theme? Was there a message that came through? And I'll scribble the message. At the very least, the title of the speech. Remember that. So write that down. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, I've never been in a contest that had 10 contestants. So I usually skip over space and I have a place to take a few notes, write the titles down and stuff and so forth. So you have room on here to do some things. Nobody's gonna read that, so you can do anything to it you want.
Right, exactly. No, that top part of the form is yours to do whatever you want to. Another thing we'll talk about in a little bit. What else is there? Yes, but I also, if I encourage chief judges or the contest chairs, whoever's putting the packet together for the judges, put in some blank paper. Put in a page or two, a sheet or two of blank paper, just so they can take notes. What else do we have up here? Evaluation, okay. Evaluation versus judging. Hopefully you know the difference between the two. Obviously, if you're evaluating a speech at your club level, you are looking at the growth that speaker has shown. You're looking at, well, you're definitely showing the techniques that you learned with that last assignment. That's good to see that same ability, whatever it is, these strong introduction, you did it again here. So it's a lot of context in evaluating, not judging. Judging is those 5 to 7 minutes are the only thing you're looking at. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how good they are, it doesn't matter how much experience they have, it doesn't matter whether it's the third time you've seen that speech, none of that matters. So it's just that 5 to 7 minutes only. Let's see.
I was gonna say, you literally have to try to forget anything you've seen that person speak about before.
Yes.
And focus just on that one.
Or whether they're a friend or somebody you've never met before. And those are all biases, things we'll get into later too. But for a judge, you have to be thinking through these things. It's not gonna just, they're going to be there, your biases are gonna be there. It's just a matter of recognizing them. And I'm just jumping ahead too much. All right, judging standards. Wow, we could talk for an hour and a half on this alone. Objectivity versus subjectivity. In a perfect world, we would be very objective, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, and considering and representing facts. That's why we do a judging form. Otherwise it would just be gut, the whole thing would be a gut call. We want to try and pick elements, and that's why, well, as we look at the judging form, look at the things they try to universalize, if that's a word. The way it's structured, is there a message, how do they use the stage, all things that they want everybody assessed on. So the form is an attempt to be objective. The problem is, we aren't objective. So we've got a structure that tries to put us into boxes and make us objective, but as people, we bring in our own experiences and our own thoughts and our own opinions, and we come up with a subjective conclusion. I can't tell you what's right or wrong. I wish I could, and Toastmasters probably wishes I could tell you, you gotta be 100% objective. Human nature doesn't let us be, so you have to try to recognize some of that. I'll take one of my own biases, and this is nothing I was gonna say later, but I'll say it now when we get the biases. One of my pet peeves are people who sing in speeches. Just drives me nuts. I don't like it. It annoys me, and it puts songs in my head that stay there forever, and I don't want to do that. But I recognize that is a subjective opinion. So I've got to filter that out when I'm evaluating a speech and ignore that, and try and come up with an objective result. So this is a constant fight. And that's why the value of the ballot refers to the attempt to be as objective as we can. And we need to try to be objective. But we also need to understand the subjective part of judging and either try to compensate for it with the objective thinking, or make that conscious decision that, hey, I liked this speech better and I can't quite figure out why. Sometimes that happens. And so you have to, allow in your head a little bit for that. I'm not saying you want to judge the whole thing subjectively, but understand that's where your brain is going, and try to understand what those feelings are and where they're coming from. Any other questions? this is my big issue, this top one. Mark, Teresa, don't listen to this. Avoid rating speakers against each other. I have trouble with that. Toastmasters says it is far more fair to set a standard expectation and then rate all speakers against that standard. To me, that is an impossible task. We are there to decide which is best. How do you decide which is best without comparing them? A Toastmaster says, well, you can do this point system. You know, you gave 25 points for this, and you gave 6 points for that, and you got 4 points for that, so therefore, this one was best. I have trouble with that. And I'm not saying you should do that, but again, this is another thing where understand how complicated it can be to be a judge. And let yourself have a little freedom in some of this. Yes, it's great to have an objective in terms of a goal to try and do this. Okay, now we talked about the accordion thing on the ballot. That's the justification for that. Most of the time it's partially a security thing, so people can't see over your shoulder. But it's also so you block out how you scored other people. So when you give this guy 8 points for something and you give the next speaker 6 points for something, that's because objectively this guy did it better than that. I don't think in a real world it's that easy to connect the two. Now, Mark or Teresa, do you want to defend Toastmasters' viewpoint? I'm just putting you on the spot, you don't have to, but what do you think? Would that help me?
I would love to, Mike.
All right.
He's a stats guy.
Actually, I think if you look at the judging criteria, it's very easy to get wrapped up as a judge by saying, well, I just think this speech is better. I like this better. But the criteria gives points for different aspects. So structure and value has a lot more than entertainment or audience participation. So that's where I think by doing the accordion method or whatever method you're going to use, you can get a more objective approach other than that speech made me laugh, or that speech was entertaining, or that speech was, oh, I felt good at the end. Yeah, structure, was there structure? Yeah, I felt great. So that's my argument.
Okay, and then my counter argument is that when you are looking at two speeches that are about 10 minutes apart, looking at the same element of two speeches that are 10 minutes apart, let's say use of the stage. Unless there's something extraordinary was done, can you really say, see, that speech 10 minutes ago was a 4-pointer, and this one 10 minutes later is a 3-pointer on that use of stage? Really? I mean that's me, and that's my stubbornness.
If I may.
Of course. I think this is a critical point, so I would talk about this one all day.
It is a critical point, and I do agree with Toastmasters International, and at the same time, I agree with most of what you're saying also, Mike. The setting a standard by which meets the standard for Toastmasters International, that we really want to remain objective and yet fair. I think it is okay to set that standard. What we're going to allow as specific points according to those back sheets of the criteria, but then also to be able to rank those two people under the circumstances by which Toastmasters has put together and yet the standard that you've set. It's almost embedded in, if you will, the standard you're presenting as your own individual judge is fitting into the standard of Toastmasters International, is more
Okay.
how I see it in general.
Some of this will become, we're kind of setting up context here for when we start looking at the ballots. And some of this will be more clear as we look at the ballots and discuss each of the categories. So some of this will be clear. It could be that we're really talking about the same thing, just in different approaches.
I think so.
I was gonna say too, I really believe in the point system too, and I try to start in the middle of the range for all the way through all the speakers. That way it gives me a chance to have that room to go like And I really like how the point system breaks it out into each individual function. So someone that is like a really great speech developer might not do as well on voice. And the whole point system really helps you capture that individual's thing and weigh it against everything else. I appreciate it, and I like to start in the middle and give myself room to go up and down based upon how everybody's doing. So even though that maybe the best speaker was first, they're still gonna get that middle score, and then I would vote everybody else down below. So the points that I give personally
But
are
what
probably
you,
really
what you
low.
just said is comparing the speakers.
But, no, but I'm giving them points based upon that standard. For me, it starts in the middle, you know, and then it goes from there.
And we're gonna talk about that too, about how many points to give, what the point system is, and how to use that effectively. And I'm not saying in any way, don't use the point system. That is not at all what I'm saying. It's just
Yeah,
simply a
yeah.
matter of comparing your columns.
Yeah.
He was an 83, he was an 85. He was a little better, it's doing some of that. And that's what Toastmasters says don't do, and that's what I kind of do sometimes. But often what I will do is fill it out independently. But before I pick first, second, third, I will go back and look at that again and say, was his structure really 5 points better than the other one? Because it's just a way of kind of double checking my interpretation of my scoring in the moment. Yeah, your standard of scoring may vary as contestants advance. That's a good thing. At the club, your expectations are lower. So an 85 speech at the club level should not be an 85 speech at the area level. And certainly not an 85-point speech at the district level. Change your standards as you go up in the process because the competition is getting tougher. If you don't do that, you're going to find yourself with a whole sheet full of 85 speeches because they're all going to be good at that level. So give yourself more breathing room in your point scale by making the standards tougher as you go up in the process. Any questions on that? All right, now we're getting into filling out the ballots. When it comes time to fill out the ballot, review the judge line. Now, you all should have copies of the ballots. If you look on the flip side of the ballot, there are those, there are the guidelines that are hugely valuable. That's what you should read if you are going to judge. Read it in advance as much as anything else. The judging criteria. That explains what you're doing on the front side and gives you a lot more information. And if you are a speaker in competing, you should really know these. This is what the judges are going to be looking at. So this is hugely valuable if you're going to be a speaker. And often when I'm running a club contest, I will make sure, I won't do it at the area because by then they're on their own. But at the club level, I will make sure each speaker has a copy of the ballot so they can see what's being expected. Because the last thing you want to see is somebody score really badly later on in the system because they didn't understand what they were going to be judged on. I was at a division contest one time, and the speaker, it was the funniest speech I've ever heard. It was hysterical. But there was no introduction, there was no conclusion. It was just a play, he probably did, like a dialogue. And he scored terribly, but it was hilarious. And he didn't understand why he got such great laughs from the audience and why he was judged poorly. So that's got to be filtered out early on, especially at the club level when something like that can win, but you have to be coached on, okay, now at the next level, this is what you're going to have to do if you want to compete, if you want to be competitive. So understand these in the background. So when I judge, I've read this thing hundreds of times, and I will still, before every contest, I will review it again. There's time to kill. While they're reading the boring rules and stuff, which you should know, or doing other stuff, or listening. I read this stuff. If I'm judging, this is my responsibility, and I review this. And if I have any doubt in my mind about, I can't quite make up my mind about that speech, then I'll read it again. And I'll read it between. I'll scan it again, especially if there's something that came in mind, or come to mind, and I'm worried about. All right, now what exactly are the criteria for effectiveness again? And I will look at read this again. And this is a constant reference, this thing on the back. And the judge, I would keep flipping that back and forth throughout the whole contest. And then and read it again before you fill out the ballot. You know, you got your point totals, go back and scan through it again and go, yep, I'm sure now. You want to hand in that ballot, be feeling absolutely confident in the way you have it ranked. When you're filling out this form, I call it compartmentalization. That means being careful. That is, let's say one of these speakers came in and everybody's wearing a suit and tie except for this one guy who comes in and is dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. What do? How do you penalize them? Should they be penalized? No. Well, probably not. If you want to, let's say, to me it'd be largely topic dependent. What are they trying to communicate? What's their message? If it clashes with their message and detracts from their message, then I might take points off, but it would only be under physical, right? Appearance, body language, speaking area. Okay, notice it doesn't even say dress, so you're judging most of, that might be a point or two. But most importantly, do not take it off of speech development. Do not take it off of speech value. Do not take it off of manner. Do not take it off of correctness. Compartmentalize something, when something's negative, compartmentalize it to that category only. Or let's say somebody uses bad language in their speech. Where does that get reflected in here? Let's say you got a speaker up here and they're giving a speech and they come back and put their hand on this person in here. All right, violation of the speaking area. You cannot touch an audience member. So does that score on effectiveness? I wouldn't. It might be a very effective move, actually, but there is a place down there for when it comes down to speaking area. All right, penalize them a couple of points on the speaking area. Or more serious things. All right, he didn't have a conclusion whatsoever. All right, that's speech development. It's not speech value. So make sure you compartmentalize and stay within that point area. Any discussion on that one?
I think that kind of harkens back to your question about if you like the speech itself and not the points. Because if you're compartmentalizing, that will help you to remove some of that subjectivity, I think.
Right.
And I feel like I've done some judging and I feel like I've failed in that in the past. Just didn't like their speech. So I kind of shade all of the points just because I just didn't like it. And like, that's not the right way to do it.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And despite everything I said earlier, objectivity is the objective.
Right.
And so that is the open objective. All right, let's see what's next. Boy, yeah, be consistent. Make sure whatever standards you apply to one speaker, you apply to all the speakers, even those who sing. Make sure your scoring is the same. Now, you don't have to use the point system. You've probably heard this before. You can use plus minuses. I've heard of smiley faces. You can really do whatever system you want. Nobody is ever going to see this top part but you. So you can do whatever system you want to create your point system. This is just a suggestion. What's critical is that, and we'll get into this more in scoring later too, but what's critical are the percentages, the weighting, 50% content, 30% delivery, that kind of thing. Make sure every contestant is evaluated or judged exactly the same. We talked about the accordion fold. Again, we talked a little bit about taking notes already, but here again, it's part of being fair, and we'll look at this again under biases. Your job is not to time speeches. I've heard of judges being disqualified for being caught looking back at the timing light. That's a little extreme, but don't look back at the timing light. It's none of your business. There are timers whose job it is to do that. So don't detract. If you, don't take some points off of effectiveness if you're pretty sure it went over 8 minutes. None of your business, not your problem. And you're only looking at what they are teaching you, so ignore the timeline. Okay, now we're getting into the judging forms, and this is where I was talking about, see the three, those are the most important things on the ballot. That content 50%, delivery 30%, language 20%. This may be the hardest thing for a judge to differentiate. If you get somebody who stands up there and is boring, but is magnificently structured and designed, it's a great structured speech, even if they read the speech, that should count more than somebody who's got a lousy speech but is a great presenter. That's hard to do. It's hard to weight it that way. And not only is it hard to do, many judges don't do it. Now, we're going to look at a couple of speeches in a little bit. That's an interesting example of that. But so anyway, so pay attention to that especially. That's always in your mind, is remember this top part. Top part is the most important. We talked about the judging criteria, pre-weighted guidelines for scoring. Yeah, we just did that a little bit. We talked about